My name's Anna. I am a pediatric speech language pathologist. I work in a NICU in Chicago, and I'm the moderator host of our parent panel today.
I'm Chelsea Durr. I'm a mom of a 2-year-old little boy who's turning 3 and a little 1-year-old girl. And I'm here as one of the panelists, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my 2-year-old son's story with dysphagia.
Hello, my name is Courtney Morey. I am mom of 3 kiddos, and our middle one, our daughter Annie, is 4 years old. She is the one who has a history of dysphagia, and we live in Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Heidi Vandermolen. I'm Senior Program Manager at Feeding Matters. I've been with the organization for 9 years, and I also have a 15-and-a-half-year-old son with dysphagia and PFD.
Courtney, do you want to share a little bit?
Sure. Our daughter Annie is 4 years old, like I said, and she has Down syndrome. So there's a large percentage of kiddos who have Down syndrome who are prone to have dysphagia and pediatric feeding disorders because of low muscle tone. For Annie's case, because of her open heart surgery and the really intense recovery that she had to go through with extensive time being intubated and many other factors, she just had it a little bit harder. And we, over the course of her first 2.5 years of life, had 6 swallow studies. We had a very mismanaged case. Just her care was very uncoordinated from start to finish, and that's why I'm very passionate about talking about dysphagia, because it is very prevalent in the Down syndrome population. And I now run a foundation that supports families who have kiddos with different diagnoses, but a lot of our families have kids with Down syndrome. So there's just so much that I've learned that I want to help other families avoid and encourage them how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. You've been such a strong advocate, and that's allowed you to help a lot of other families too. Okay, Chelsea, will you share a little bit of your story?
Yeah, sure. My story's a little bit different. Carson was born. I had a little bit of a traumatic birth. I was in labor with him for 56 hours. But other than that, everything seemed pretty normal. We came home. Definitely had reflux, but I heard from other moms. I was a first-time mom, very scared bringing this newborn baby home. Um, Again, I just thought like reflux is normal, and the amount he was throwing up, I brought it to my pediatrician a lot, his pediatrician a lot, and I said, "Is this okay?" And she said, "He's gaining weight. That's all we look for." I pushed and pushed. He was in the ER about 6 times prior to one, with pneumonia, with bronchiolitis. We were in and out of the hospital, and it got to a point where I was like, something else has to happen. Again, first time mom. I thought kids were supposed to be sick. He's a daycare kid. I didn't know this level of severity. Now that I have a 1-year-old daughter, I can see the difference between like normal colds all the time versus what he was having. So around 18 months old, I really, really pushed and I said, we can't do this anymore. He has this constant gurgle in his chest that I can hear. And they said, again, that's probably a floppy throat. It's nothing to worry about. Finally got the swallow study, and immediately in the first minute of him taking thin liquids, they were like, he's aspirating every thin liquid that he swallows. It's going straight to his lungs and just sitting there. So his story is still continuing. We don't have a diagnosis for him. We don't know why. They said they don't see this very often. There's usually a diagnosis that comes along with this condition, and we're still kind of in it. We're figuring it out. That was at 18 months old, and he'll be 3 next week. So my story is a little bit about trying to figure out what is going on after now a year and a half of knowing he aspirates and not getting any answers.
Yeah, I think that's something that's so important to share is how long the process can take, right? Is it can feel and it is so long, especially when you don't have those answers. So it's a lot of having to like stick with it and advocate for
Yeah.
yourself and your kid, which can be really hard. Thank you guys for sharing. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is with dysphagia, often thickened liquids will be recommended as like a management tool. So within that, I think both of you guys found gel mix and pure thick for Annie and Carson. Will you share a little bit about how you found that and what thickening liquids has looked like for you?
So we went into that first swallow study. He was 18 months old, and we sat down, and immediately they said he's aspirating every thin liquid. We did the foods, we did nectar thick. I didn't know what any of this meant. Like, they told me he's aspirating thin liquids, and I was like, okay, what is that word, and what does it mean, and like, what's the severity, and is this why we've been in the ER, and like, what does that like just help me understand. So I was at a really low point just because they told me this, but they didn't have answers for me. And the speech therapist that was doing our study took me out in a separate room. I had an 18-month-old, so he was running around. And she gave me a piece of paper and she said, "This is going to be overwhelming, but I'm gonna go through each of these thickeners and I'm gonna tell you pros and cons." She's like, "I put this piece of paper together by myself because I don't think that we as a health network have a good option for parents. And this is my passion. And here is 12 different options. Some of them he can't have because they're adult. Some of them you have to only do cold and hot, and some of them taste bad." And she circled Purific really big and said, "I'm going to send you home and you're going to get this one first. You're going to try it. And if there's any reason you don't like it, then you can try the others. But I think sending you home with a list of things that you don't know isn't the right move. So I want you to go home and I want you to try Purific." And we got super lucky that we had her because we never had to experiment with ones that don't feel or don't taste good or don't work in hot liquids. We just went home with this recommendation for Purific. And I won't go too far into it, but I got to meet the owners of Purific twice now. I got to be with him at an AAP conference in Pennsylvania where I live. And I just like cry every time I see them because they made that part of our journey so easy because Carson just took it and it just has been his normal.
Yeah, that's so great. I also feel like I learned that story of the provider you work with is a teachable moment too. I think for the provider of like taking decision analysis can be really overwhelming. And so being like, I'm going to still give you all the options, but just start with this one and then we can kind of go from there. So I think that's
A
something
hundred
that's,
percent. She didn't come and say, "Here's all of your options. Go home and research it and figure
yeah,
out what works best for you." She said, "I'm I can tell you're overwhelmed. I can tell you that this is new for you. Here's the best one. Go home, try it."
yeah,
And
which I love that strategy as a provider for sure. Thank you for
mhm.
sharing. Courtney,
Okay, so our journey with gel mix, because we started with gel mix first because Annie was, gosh, 2 months old when she had her first swallow study. However, we were advised to thicken with rice cereal, and you don't know what you don't know. Um, let's see, was it before? No, after her open heart surgery, we were still thickening with rice cereal, like a certain brand. And I had seen myself that all rice cereal was being recalled and for high levels of arsenic, which was so alarming. And um, 2 days later, the dietitian for the cardiologist department called me to inform me. I said, "Oh, I've known for days. Thank you." She said, "Okay, so you just want to switch to a different brand of rice cereal." And I said, no, ma'am, actually, the way that rice is grown is the reason for the high risk of arsenic. So I will no longer be using any form of rice cereal for my daughter. Then I started looking myself. She made no recommendations for what to use. And it was because of another mom, which in my case, it always tends to be because of another mom who has a, neurotypical child who has dysphagia, who just happened to be my friend who said, oh my gosh, I have some gel mix, come over and get it and I'll teach you how to use it. And so at that point, Annie was 7 or 8 months old. And I felt really confident because of her help. And I was so grateful for this product that I ended up reaching out through social media to Gel Mix Pure Thick and kind of told them our daughter's story and that I really wanted to help with making sure other moms had access to this because no one was talking about it. And I was alarmed by that. And once I learned the big component for me was learning that it didn't have any xanthan gum in it, being educated on that and how, this isn't just something that a child eats in their diet. This is something that Annie was getting 6, 7 times a day. And just knowing the buildup, whether it's the risk for arsenic or these gums we already had struggles with constipation and GI health, and I just didn't want to do anything that could make that worse. And so then after she turned 1, we switched to Pure Thick, and I have just been given so much support from the company for how to educate other families on how to use it. I mean, there was one time I went to a local mom's house and I was teaching her how to thicken her child's formula. And we learned that because it was one of the dairy-free formulas, it had to actually be thickened in a different order to reach the right viscosity. And had we not done the ITSE test, then we would have never known that. So it really just takes so much support. And I'm so grateful that the company was there for me even moving forward to help other moms too.
Yeah. I think that's really cool that you found it through a parent. I think that's the whole power to Feeding Matters is connecting parents that you can find resources like that. I think that's really cool. I also do work with the company that does Gel Mix and Pure Thick too.
Okay.
So yes, I agree. I really like them as a company. I think they're really generous with their resources and they really like supporting families, which is great. So it's great that you had that experience too. Is there anything that you guys wish you would have known prior to starting to thicken, any hot tips? I know my favorite one to tell parents with Pure Thick especially is it's freeze thaw stable, so you can make popsicles and they would melt into a thickened liquid, which I think for kids especially is so fun. Is there anything like that where you're like, oh, this is a nice tip that I wish I would have known?
Everything. I wish I had known everything because I mean, our wait time to get swallow studies, the lack of support in swallow studies, like Chelsea said, they're using words where it's oh, there's a slight penetration we actually, I think I told you this, Anna, we had 3 swallow studies before anyone actually used the actual word dysphagia.
Yeah.
And so, you're going through something that you don't even understand, it's just swallow issue, you're told or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of a tricky word. So I remember giving Annie a bath one night practicing dysphagia, how to say it. So
yeah,
I wish I had known so much.
I know. I think that's a good, not even tip, but importance from the provider and then from the parent too, to ask okay, what is the diagnosis, right? If you're trying to explain it from my perspective, if I'm trying to explain it in a digestible way to a family, it can both be accurate and digestible, right? You don't have to eliminate the actual word. And then from the parent perspective too, okay, but what is the like actual code that's going in, like what is a diagnosis, so that people use the correct terminology. Chelsea, is there
Yes.
anything that you wish you would have known?
Um, I don't have like tactical as much like popsicles, but I wish I would have been more prepared about social situations. So we would go to birthday parties, and the first thing they do is have juice boxes out. And I'm like, and I have a 2 year old that obviously wants the straw and he wants to poke it through and he wants to do all the things. He doesn't understand why I have to cut it off and bring a cup of his own and put thickener in it, and then we have to weed. And that transition of like home where I can control my situation versus going into social situations. Like everyone's heard of a peanut allergy. We know don't bring peanuts to daycare. That is like widely known and you just don't do it. But like to pull my kid aside and be like, you can't have that, and then explain to the parent at the same time, like, it's not that he can't have juice box, he can, he just has to have it thickened. And it's just that part of it for me was tough. And even just knowing that I have to bring a cup, I have to bring the thickener. Pure Thick is great because they have the single packets that you can take along, and we just threw them in the diaper bag. But I'm still learning how to be a mom. I'm still learning about my child. I'm still learning everything about being a mother. And then this on top of it, that just added to my like anxiety of going to a party and making sure he was okay, and
Yeah.
like what to bring, like supplies.
Yeah, and being asked to, or maybe feeling like you need to explain something that you don't even feel like you fully maybe understand. I can imagine that
Right?
that's like really stressful. So yeah, I think that's a
Yeah,
great tip to be
people
able to
say like
lean
what
on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
people automatically say, "Oh, what's wrong?" And I'm like, I don't, we don't know. He aspirates thin liquids, which means liquids sit on his lungs,
Yeah.
and we just have to be very careful. And do you email them and call them beforehand and let them know? Like
Yeah.
that seems like I don't know.
Yeah,
So
I think
learning.
that's such a helpful like layer to think about, because yeah, I think yeah, that's important. That's life, right? Like this is one
Mhm.
piece of your and Carson's life, but to participate in the rest of it, it's something you're always having to think about. So yeah, that's such a great one. Okay, what's like one action call you would have for providers, families, anything? What would be like your call to action for anything related to like thickening liquids, dysphagia, care management,
Like, what would I encourage families to do?
or like an action call for like providers on the education side, or like
I
whatever.
have
Just like,
plenty of those.
I know that's why I threw that little hook out there. But yeah, an action call of like, I would love if there could be more of X.
So I, I mean, so much of it I think should fall on the providers because this is, you know, we're counting on them. And so if I could wave a magic wand, I wish that pediatricians were better informed and equipped with just the basics of dysphagia. I know that, having a child who used to have, 8 different specialists within a children's hospital, I understand how these things work, but just an elementary understanding of dysphagia would have been really helpful for us in the beginning because in our case, it was so severe that not even our pulmonologist was properly managing Annie's dysphagia. I mean, we had to end up going to another city and another hospital to get proper care um, from our pulmonologist because Annie used to have pulmonary hypertension. And so for kiddos with Down syndrome, the number one cause of death in Down syndrome is pneumonia. And so this is a huge deal and it has been mismanaged for way too long. And that's why I'm very passionate about it. But pulmonary hypertension is the other really big fear for a lot of families. And if the dysphagia isn't being properly monitored, that could cause a pulmonary hypertensive crisis. And I mean, it could end in death. So it's
Yeah.
it's a big deal. Um, so I wish that there was just like better continuity of care across the board. That these providers were using more of Feeding Matters resources. Um, and then as far as parents go, the work I do at the foundation, I'm trying to put resources out there for them. So it's like saying, this isn't on you, but I want to help equip you so you can advocate for yourself. So you don't
Yeah.
just have to, you know, there's so many hospitals and there's so many programs, but if a parent is informed early on, that could save a lot of hospital stays,
Yeah.
a lot of exposure to radiation, a lot of just emotional stress.
Mhm.
So, if that answered your question.
Yes, no, it definitely did. I think that um it's education's so hard, right? Because we want to provide it to everyone. And I appreciate how you're viewing it as like not adding more to the caregiver, that like they have to
Mm.
be responsible for like educating themselves, and where could we educate on the system side. And I hear that with especially our kids like Annie, who are more medically complex and have a lot of specialists, having their primary care physician be kind of like the foundation for that team. And if
Oh,
that
yeah.
foundation can have a good understanding of like the rest of that pyramid, not as in depth, right? Like that would be wild to have someone understand everything as in depth, but having a solid foundation, I think, yeah, it could be really helpful. So I definitely hear that. Chelsea, what do you have a call to action?
Yeah, it's funny. I have my bullets in front of me, and it's literally exactly what Courtney is saying. I wish that the pediatrician was in the center of the spoke. It's supposed to be that way. The pediatrician at the center of the spoke, and then they're coordinating with all of the specialists. Um, and then we can go to one person to get all like the answers, and we're still going to the other appointments, but we're going back to the
Mhm.
source of truth, and they're learning with us along the way. That's what I wish it would happen. Um, I did find an angel throughout this process of somebody who came in, worked for a different health network, came into the one that we currently go to, and he sat us down one of the first times, and I was just crying and saying, like, I don't feel like anyone's listening to me. Carson was in the ER so many times with pneumonia, and it was really bad. He said to me, and this just it will live with me forever. He said, if you're not getting the care that your kid deserves at this network, there are other places. They'll do anything to keep you here because that's our goal. Like that's what they get rewarded for, to keep in network. But it was the first time someone out of the pulmonologist, ENT, a gastro, like all of them, they all just try to ping you around and say, okay, it's not that, you're good, go to the next. Okay, it's not neuro, go to GI. It's not GI, go to pulm. It's not pulm, go to ENT. The first time someone said, maybe this isn't the health network for your family. There are programs where you can sit down from 8 to 3, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. You do everything all in one day. You get the swallow study, someone reads it, and then you go into all the specialties and they talk together in during that day. Um, just that was amazing. We didn't end up doing it yet. It might be in our future, but just to have that level of I'm a human and
Collaboration.
my kid is
Yeah.
going through something, and you're saying maybe this isn't the place for you. Like that was a light enlightening moment, because you're so overwhelmed with all of this that you don't
Yeah.
think outside the box, and not because you don't want to be a good mom, just because you're not thinking like that. I
Yeah.
thought
And I
these
think,
people were the best.
yeah. And I think I love your analogy of the spoke. I love that analogy of the center and then collaborating on the outside, back to what you said originally. And then I think on the back end too, like, yeah, there's always options. And I think oftentimes when we're in stressful situations, we feel like, I think sometimes the way as providers, we present the information, it doesn't feel like it's a choice. And I think reminding families, like you're saying, there's always a choice, right?
Yep.
So if it's not serving you where you are, you can go, or if that means asking your provider. What I'm hearing you say is that this is the only option. Is that like what you're meaning to communicate too? Because that can also call the front of mind like, oh no, like there's these other options, right? So I think that's a great call to action of like reminding people that there's always choices, and then educating about that spoke too. I really like that. Thank you. Okay, the last little bit, Heidi and I are going to chat about resources that are available to address some of these calls to action. I know thickening can be so overwhelming, and it feels like there's never enough time in a day to like educate on it because it's a very complex concept. So I will say healthier thickening with gel mix and pure thick, they've done a lot of work with like Courtney talked about, it is a whole different language. She mentioned IDDSI. It's this thickening standard we use to determine the thickness of liquids, and oftentimes if a child has dysphagia, they'll be recommended a specific consistency of liquid using this standard. And so healthier thickening has done testing with gel mix with different formulas and breast milk and stuff within this standard, and they have recommended recipes. So as a provider, that saved me like a ton of time, where if a kid's on Enfamil NeuroPro or Similac versus breast milk, knowing where to start when I'm thickening their liquids. And then as a parent, it can be a great resource too. If you're just thickening on your own, kind of like Courtney did, and finding this, it can be a great place to start to figure out the recipe for your specific milk or formula. And then they have the same thing with Pure Thick, where it's kind of already been tested for liquids. And Heidi, I'm sure you'll have a lot to share about all the education resources, so you can take it away.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say, Courtney and Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us, for your honesty and sharing your journey, because I know it's not easy, and it really, truly will help other families with the information that you've shared. Getting back to Feeding Matters resources, let me just start out with our conference. We have an International Pediatric Feeding Disorder Conference. You both mentioned pediatricians. We know how important it is. They see the kiddos. They're the first ones to, come up with a diagnosis or, refer you. So the conference brings together healthcare professionals and families on all things feeding differences, including dysphagia. We have our family guide to PFD, which talks about the 4 domains in case a family is new to this, or chances are a lot of times if a child is diagnosed with dysphagia, they're going to be diagnosed with pediatric feeding disorder. So we do have a family guide that explains the 4 domains, tips and tricks from families who've been through this journey. We also have our flagship program, the Power of Two parent-to-parent mentoring. You both mentioned how important it was to hear from other families, to be connected with other families. That's exactly what this program does. We all know the feeding journey is not easy. Each of us have, specific experiences with the healthcare system or specific doctor. This program really helps families get their confidence back. Like Chelsea, you had mentioned, you didn't know you could switch. Like, we encourage families, you know your child best. Courtney, you are Annie's advocate. You know her best. So this program really just reinforces first-time moms who maybe they don't have a diagnosis, but they know something's wrong. They know they're, in the ER a lot for pneumonia. So again, I can't say enough positive things about the Power of Two parent-to-parent mentoring. And then we also have our family assistance program. So if a family has to go through an intensive feeding program or needs something covered that isn't covered by insurance, encourage them to go to our website, feedingmatters.org. We have $10,000 that we can award to families to help cover out-of-pocket expenses. And again, Pure Thick and Gel Mix are amazing, like just supporting our families and offering, your products for families. So I think we're just about at time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I could listen to people share their stories for days. So I appreciate all of your time. And thanks for sharing those resources, Heidi. Everyone check out Feeding Matters. They are the best. Thanks, guys.